Hello, I'm Roger Mills, and I work for the Open University in the United Kingdom in its East Anglian region. I'm going to be chairing this session on student support services in open and distance education. I'm very keen to emphasise that student support is an integral part of distance education, and I want to test out some of my thoughts in discussion with colleagues from different parts of the world and different institutions to see whether they have similar thoughts as mine or whether they are radically different in their thinking. We've got a number of distinguished people here today. I'd like to introduce them to you now. First of all, we've got Professor Sharifah Shahabudin from the Kebangsaan University in Malaysia. She's Professor of Medical Education there, and she runs a postgraduate program for medical practitioners. Then we have Dr. Devendra Choudhry, who is Director of the Delhi Regional Centre in the Indira Gandhi National Open University in India. And Dr. Choudhry has been there, I think, since the Delhi Centre started. And finally, we've got Jane Brindley, who's currently researching into student support and open learning at the University of Ottawa. And previously, she was in charge of the Student Services section of Athabasca University. First of all, however, I think we need to be a little clearer about what we each mean by student support, because we can get really confused about these issues unless we do attempt some kind of definition. So I'm going to ask each of my colleagues to say what they think the key elements of student support are in the context of their own organisation and their own work. So Sharifah, can we start with you and hear about student support in Malaysia and in your university?
Yeah, within the context of my program, which is a postgraduate program for doctors who would like to become family physicians. We see the student support is coming with the program, that it is essential to the program. That's how we look at student support. And within that is the requirement that we ensure that they have proper facilities where they are, we have a proper program for them, and we facilitate their learning by having proper support for their learning processes, and also non-academic kind of support like counseling, somebody that they can reach out to if they have some problems, and financial as well in that respect, by ensuring that they have some kind of monetary support to do the program.
Right. Would you say that the student support in your institution then is absolutely integrated into the whole program?
Very much so. I would agree with you that it is integral to the program. Right. Without it, I think there is no program.
Now, Devendra Choudhry, I mean, the Indira Gandhi National Open University is a huge operation. What about student support there?
Rogers, what we have done is, ever since the inception of the university, we had given a lot of thrust on the student support system by establishing regional centers, study centers, and having the other networks. These all centers are based at the conventional institutions, and we are not paying any rent. This was evolved in the beginning, and presently we saw student support system, one, as a gainful support to student, to helping the student the material which we have sent, one, to removing the isolation which is existing in distance education mode of learning by giving them support in administration, academic. Therefore, they can successfully come out when they complete their whatever program they are pursuing for, maybe certificate, maybe diploma, or this thing. Now, we had another reason to be like that since beginning, making, as you said, integral part, student support integral part of the program, because already there was a very strong correspondence institute system existing in our country, which was looked down upon by conventional education as second grade. So that was because there was no support system in those institutions. By providing student support services, adding to the existing correspondence model what we have gained a lot of popularity in students. They do not feel that they are different from conventional education institutions. I mean, they feel very happy. They get all the support. Support in the sense, our every study center has a coordinator. Our every study center has a library. Every study center has equipment, electronic. Then there are the audio-video counseling session. then assignments are submitted, they are evaluated, they are returned back to students.
Right.
So they don't feel they are isolated.
Okay, well that's very interesting, and I think that's leading us towards some kind of overall definition of student support. It's really all those services that are in addition to the course material that students get when they're studying at a distance. And these services may be administrative, they may be library services, as you said, it can be counselling, advice and guidance, and they can be given in a number of different modes. They can be done at a distance, by telephone, or in group work. Now, and I think Devendra Choudhry has just said that the Indira Gandhi National Open University, rather like the University of Malaysia, these student support services are integral. But it's not the case, Jane, throughout the world, is it? And I think that one of the issues is how people who believe strongly in student support, how they can actually collect the evidence to show to people who fund student support or fund institutions that student support is a really important element for the success of the student. And Jane's doing some research in this area, and perhaps you could say a little bit from your perspective as a researcher, but also as the former head of student services at Athabasca University.
Well, I like the way that you just described student support, because I don't think student support is a prescribed list of services. By its very nature, it can't be, because we look at different contexts and different constraints, different opportunities, different kinds of students, geography, different resources that are available. But we can define learner services by what they're meant to be doing, which is to facilitate the progress of learners through the course and helping them to meet their goals. And I think then looking at that within each context, we can define what learner services are. I think the challenge for us, I would agree with you, I think learner services are integral. They're very much a part of what the learner's experience is. And if you take yourself out of the institutional context and put yourself as a learner going into an open learning system, you don't separate out your course materials from what kind of service you get from the institution. It's a whole experience for you. But as I've been fortunate, and I've traveled around the world, and I've worked in a number of different open and learning systems, what I have found is that because I think partly because of the way distance education has developed, and now we talk more about open learning systems, but we did come from more of an industrial model of education with learner support added on as we began to see the problems with that model, and we kind of bolted those services onto the side of what was seen, at least initially, as a complete educational system. And then as resources began to shrink in many institutions, they began to unbolt those because they were seen as add-ons to a complete system. And as practitioners then, we're faced with the challenge of trying to provide good, strong rationale for why those learner services should be integral. They shouldn't be considered as add-ons. And that's the area that I'm working in now, is trying to build a theoretical base to show how we can offer a more holistic, how we look from the student's experience at student support systems.
Perhaps we could just talk a little bit about how we evaluate student support. But before we do that, perhaps I should just say a word about the British Open University Student Support Services. And we are in the process of rethinking them at the moment, but one of the main issues that we've always hung on to is the fact that the student should have individual attention by their tutor or their counsellor, and that they can contact the student, the tutor or counsellor at any time. And in many ways, I believe that the sort of student support that one can provide in distance education, it can be actually superior to that in a conventional institution because of this individualization of support.
Right.
And I think that's very important. But the evaluation issue that Jane raised, I think is tricky, and I wonder whether there's anything we can generalize from our very different backgrounds. We've got postgraduate medical studies, we've got Devendra Choudhry with I think 86,000 students in the Delhi Regional Centre alone. and then Jane from Athabasca, where the students were fewer and more dispersed. I mean, one's tempted sometimes to say the best way to experiment on this is to take a really scientific approach. And supposing you had one cohort of students and you set them aside and said, you're not going to get any student support this year, and then you have another cohort of students and you give them student support. I mean, as a scientist, that's I'd love to do that, but morally, one can't actually do that sort of experiment in this kind of work. But I mean, let me ask you, Sharifah, I mean, how do you actually set about evaluating whether spending money on student support rather than on glossier course materials and better television programs is worthwhile doing?
I want to take you back on the research bit. I think it's a bit unethical once you start your program to say one lot will get the support and one lot will not get. But what we actually did was before during the development of the program, there was a piece of research that was done first, which was really experimental in a sense, where we had one group of practitioners which had support in the sense that their learning needs, they were assisted in identifying their learning needs. And we had a group that did not have this, but both were given access to learning materials. Right. And we did this experimentally in a particular area, management of anxiety neurosis, and compared the performance. And we used standardized patients where we could really go and assess their competence. And we found there were differences. The group that had the support in terms of identifying needs, certainly at the end of it, when we sent a standardized patient again, did achieve the competencies we wanted them to achieve compared to the other group. So in that sense, before we developed, we then had an idea that if we were going to develop a program, then the learning experiences that students must be on a reflective basis. You must help them learn what is it that they do not know and direct them to resources, appropriate resources. And that is built into our support system.
I think there's a really important point in that, which is what Sharifah's talking about, is articulating as well what kinds of students we're trying to produce, as opposed to just testing whether we can impart some knowledge and then prove that the knowledge can be reproduced by the student and that they stay in the course, which are very just basic kinds of indicators. But what you're saying is we're trying to do more than that. We're trying to develop some kinds of generic skills. Yes. We're trying to develop more deep learners who are more reflective in their thinking. And problem solvers. That's right, and problem solvers. And learner support is going to do that more than just the package. Yes.
Yeah, not only this, one thing which you said and also Sharifah said is absolutely correct. But when we look, the support system can vary. What is support system? Evaluation, one component of support system which we are going. And now in many cases I have seen this, since we have a distance learner student with us, they submit their assignments. They want those assignments back after evaluation. And if they are not properly evaluated, properly commented, properly assessed, because the conscious learner student wants to have the assessment of the evaluation which he or she has submitted. So in many cases, what happens when the assignment comes back to student, and though he has never visited study center, he has never visited, only he has sent the assignment by post and he has received by post. But finding those comments on the global sheet, and they are so encouraging, motivated. So student was forced to go to the study center, meet the counselor. So I mean, they are finding it very interesting, and because what he wanted to know in that system, which he was not aware that whether he will know, either he has to go to the study center. Delhi does not have the problem because it's commutable. But you think of the other centers where a student has to commute 500 kilometers to go for the study center, and then assignment is not proper. But I tell you, as I said earlier, that this inbuilt student support system services cannot be separated from the print material. I put it like this: course preparation and course presentation. Course preparation is done by the concerned school, by the faculty, to prepare those blocks. Now, if those blocks are not properly presented by the regional services division, by the student sports division, which for my region I am heading, so then whole charm of this thing is lost. It is like you are preparing a good breakfast, but displaying is not in a proper way. So whole charm is lost. So student support service is very, very important. And that is where students feel, you know, we should not forget one thing also, that basically we have introduced distance education, which has received a very encouraging recognition, I'm saying. But partly we should also know, when student is coming to us, he comes from the conventional system.
And the interesting thing about what the example that you gave, I think, is that when the student had the interaction and the support and gave the feedback, it changed their behavior.
Yes,
and that's what we're trying to do, is engage in a change process. You know, they got the support and they went to the study center then.
And it is like, you know, open university has open accountability. I put it this way. Open accountability. You know.
Right. Well, I think it's very interesting, that some of the issues that have come out there, and I wouldn't want people watching us to think that we could prescribe a student support service that could fit into any culture and any institution in the world, because clearly we all operate sort of different student support services. But I think there are some basic principles on which student support services might be established. And Sharifah has already sort of said, I think, some words of advice to people setting up a new distance teaching organisation, or for a department going into distance teaching for the first time, is think about your student support before you start, and think about it at the beginning, and do some work with potential students to just answer a few questions like, who are our students? First of all, we need to know, before we can set up a student support service, I'd say, we need to know who our students are going to be. Are they going to be coming in open entry, as they do at IGNU and the UKOU, or are they going to be postgraduate professionals? And the student support service will differ. So we need to know who our students are, first of all. Then we need to be able to assess what their needs are, which is the point that you were saying. And then we need to be able to evaluate that. We need and put in place a support system. Now, and this isn't cheap. And I think that one of the issues I'd like to ask you about is, you know, are you ever asked, or is there a debate in your institution that says, you know, we ought to spend more money on course production because we need to produce more courses, and less money on student support? Because after all, if we are teaching at a distance, why do we need you know, tutorials in centres face-to-face, or why do we need all these support mechanisms? And I think it's an interesting issue for any institution to ask itself, what percentage of their resources do they spend on student support, compared with what percentage of their resources do they spend on the production of materials? And I don't know whether, Sharifah, you could answer that for your department or not, but let me just, while you're thinking about that, say that, broadly speaking, the Open University spends the same amount of money on its on the production of courses and its central academic staff as it does on its regional network and its student support systems. But what about your university?
Okay, in terms of real money, I can't say it, because we share costs. Ours is a collaborative project,
Right.
in a sense that, for instance, in course development of materials, for instance, we don't have to pay the people who help us develop the materials, because they come from the Ministry of Health. They're specialists in the Ministry of Health. We make them honorary teachers of the university. They're happy to see their names on the materials. Yeah. So in a sense, that is free for us, but somebody is paying for it. But we will bear the cost of the production. In terms of tutoring and counseling and mentoring, the same people are again trained to do that. So again, in that sense, we share the cost. The university is not taking over the burden of having to finance that part. In terms of teleconferencing, we may pay the bills. For instance, if we have a session, we pay for the equipment. But whatever is on the other side will be paid for by the Ministry of Health. So it's a shared responsibility, and I haven't had to feel the pinch yet of saying where you should cut.
It sounds a really good model, though, to be sharing this development amongst a number of institutions. I think that's really helpful. I mean, Devendra, in India, you have state open universities and the national open university. I mean,
there are also the correspondence institutes, so many, and then there has to be a lot of coordination in between. And even since beginning, Ronald, if you recollect, of course we have heavily depended on the British model for IGNOU, but we have tried to indigenize that model depending on the local requirement of the country. And when we, especially since we are talking about the cost part, expenditure, in our IGNOU, what we do, it's not kind of course there's a separate money for the regional service division and there's separate money for the production of the material.
Yeah.
But fortunately, our student support system is still less expensive. I'll try to say why. As you said, we were talking of sharing, so as you said, government and those institutions say. First, the study center which we have, we are not paying any rent for the building, which is a very expensive thing. We are not paying all over the country. We have 252 centers.
That's a wonderful example of cooperation again, isn't it?
So that's what I'm saying. We are talking of this thing. So the host institution where our study center is, they give us required specified premises which we need, say 4, 5 room, 3 room, 4, whatever it is there, depending on the area, city. In Delhi it's difficult. So then it also makes the thing complementary, supplementary. With the institution. They get those audio video cassettes what we produce. So we tell them, okay, whenever it's not meant for our student, it's meant for your student also. The equipment, electronic equipment which are there, even they can use it. So, and they are not charging. Second thing, there is still in India, there is some kind of educational dedication is still there. Why I'm saying, because paying a counselor for counseling session, paying the tutor counselor for the evaluation of assignments, paying the sporting staff, because here I'll say there are two kind of things different. One is the academic sport and second is non-academic sport.
Right.
We have a sporting staff in the regional center, part-time, paid by us, like suppose student has come or assignment has been received, immediately he'll put that thing in register. So-and-so has sent this assignment. So, so after receiving the assignment, he will send it, give it to the concerned, because coordinator is the manager there in our study center. He is a very, very important person.
Well, I think you've raised another issue, and that we shouldn't think of student support as being just the tutors and the counsellors and the academic staff, because there's this whole raft of support workers, administrative staff and other support staff who are absolutely crucial to successful distance teaching. And
I was just sorry, in between, even it is said, if you take the student support away, I mean, just it's a situation. Some students say, okay, material is so good, we don't need to go to study center.
Yes.
So now, which means the self-instruction material, if it is so self-instruction, so there is a voice in this thing, why to have a counseling session?
I think that's really, that again raises a really interesting point about, if you had the perfect course, a student would be able to follow each step in the course very simply and would be able to learn on their own. But would they? I mean, is the outcome important or is the process important?
It again varies from the program. If the student is a little more mature, he will not be needing that support. If a student is from the undergraduation level, he will be needing that support more. Okay. So it varies from program to program.
Right. Okay, now I want us to focus in a bit more now, because we've been talking perhaps in generalities about student support. I'd like to focus in on the particular issue of counselling and advice to students, perhaps at the start of their course, and advice about whether it's the right course that they should do, and for their career or for their interest. And I want to ask Jane about this, because Jane, the Athabasca Counselling Service for many years was a model which did actually support students more personally perhaps than most other universities. And I wonder whether you could just reflect on how counsellors can support students or potential students in thinking through, the sort of place of their studies in their overall life and career, and where are the limits? How far do you go?
Right. For the student support people at Athabasca University, I think when we were first envisioning services, we were looking a lot at retention and retention strategies. And then as we moved along, we began to look at deeper issues like how do we help students to become better learners? How do we help students to become more independent? So even with our orientation program, where a prospective learner would approach us, the goal of that service was to help to teach that learner how to make a decision for themselves. And so the orientation program would not just provide them with information, for example, about our institution, but it would help them to look at information about themselves. What kind of learner are they? How do they best learn? Are there some skills that they need to develop in order to handle the special rigors that they will need in independent learning? Those kinds of questions. So right from the very beginning, we start working with the learner to try to help them to become more independent. And when I say independent, I don't mean isolated, because at the same time, one of the goals is to connect them and help them help them to learn how to learn by connecting with others, whether that's a peer or someone in the institution or their spouse or their children, but how to get others to help them with their learning.
I think that's really important point, that we're not trying to train people to become independent learners. Perhaps interdependent is a better word, or train them to be networkers, really. I mean, I think that's what you're saying. But Sharifah, have you got a comment on what James is saying?
I agree entirely. We do it as when they come in, the first group that comes in for the first academic year, when they enroll, we have what we call an introductory course for 2 weeks for them. Part of the course is to orientate them to the discipline. The other part is to orientate them, to make them more aware of themselves as learners. It's a bad word, learners at a distance. But anyway, those issues that you're discussing, lifelong learner, independent learner, problem solving. But the other thing that we are rather concerned about is the development of collegiality, because that's very important, and they have to carry on with their lives, depending on their colleagues, learning from their colleagues, supporting each other. That's one of the issues we bring in right from the beginning, and we make them work in groups. We make them solve problems. We make them go look for information and share with each other, and to look at ways at how they can connect with each other, not just with us. With regards to mentoring, to us it's like a fortuitous kind of relationship. If it takes, it takes. You know, if it doesn't, then the student will find someone else whom they can relate to, because it's very much more than mentoring. It's having like a role model, someone who will share his wisdom or her wisdom with you. You know. So we do train our supervisors, we call them supervisors in the program, not just tutors. We do train them in techniques, make them more aware, but we don't know whether they will be good mentors or not. But we know that there are people who are good, and the students know who these people are, and they can always connect with these people by phone or by fax, or whatever, you know. So, so this is, we leave it quite open on the mentoring part.
I think that's very interesting, because I mean, if I could just say a little bit about the British Open University. I mean, for years we've supported students forming what we call self-help groups. And sometimes they're successful, in some years they're successful because of the chemistry of the people in the group, and other years they're not. But we do try and support the setting up of them. And we give the groups advice as to how to go about a self-help group, and some basic sort of information about how to run a group discussion and so on. And in setting these groups up, in my region anyway, we get a lot of support from the Students' Association. And I think increasingly in the UK OU, the Students' Association, USA as it's known, is helping enormously with some of the issues of student support. So that's a very encouraging sign.
I think students support coming from students themselves, to me, it sounds more authentic and credible. They're more likely to relate.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And the other day I attended the graduation ceremony of this Birmingham Regional Centre, East Midland. So I was, because we are also started having the music of association students coming, because the number is very large. So and I could find, what best thing I like was there was a student union's representative in the procession.
Right.
So it was
Very
quite a
interesting.
remarkable thing, which and in fact we are going to decentralize our convocations also on the regional center.
Yeah.
Because looking at the vastness of the country, it's not possible.
Yeah.
And we don't expect students to come all the way from one state to Delhi just to get degree, and that's the distance he's covering.
Right.
So we are going to do, I mean, that's what, I mean, I attended that and I'm submitting a report to my Vice Chancellor for this thing. They are going to do this. But one thing I just want to say, referring to Jane and this, they were saying about the requirement of support to the students, depending on this. We'll come back to this, what you mentioned about. You know, in our, in Indira Gandhi Open University, you know, we have structured courses in that. In certain courses, counseling is must. Now, though it is very much against the basics of distance education philosophy, I agree with you. Okay, we cannot make counseling session compulsory for distance learner. But we have found certain courses are structured that way. Until we make it compulsory, the student cannot pursue.
Right.
So because mainly those programs are which have a practical component, like our diploma in construction management, diploma in computer application, bachelor in computer application, and these are the BSc nursing.
Yeah.
So these are the programs where some kind of counselling has to be there, linked up with the practical component.
I think that's right, and I mean we have many courses which have compulsory residential schools. And some of our postgraduate courses, and we've got a new postgraduate course for the training of teachers. Well, clearly you can't not go and practice to be training a teacher. You can't take openness that far.
Same with the family physician.
Same with
And one thing
medics,
is becoming very clear about the distance education mode of learning. A student support system has to be integrated. We have been emphasizing on this thing. Has to be there.
Yeah.
Some services must be given to students. And if it, I think if proper services are given in a proper way, and we just also have some economy on it, how to do it. That is very important.
Right, right.
So,
no, absolutely.
So, and that means to have the economical, let me put it, economical student support system.
Right. Now, let me pick you up on that, because one of the issues we're going to come on to is student support for particular groups of students. But let me just summarise where I think we've got to. We've been actually talking about student support in general terms, and I think there are a number of basic principles that have come out from the different countries. But it is clear that people do arrange student support in different ways, in different places, for different courses, for different institutions, for different groups of students, and that's very important. But it's also important that even within an institution, we don't regard all the students as the same. And I think in the Indira Gandhi National Open University and in the British Open University, we have, for example, a lot of disabled students. In the British Open University, we have nearly 3,500 students with disabilities, which is more than the rest of the universities put together in the UK. And it's natural that people with disabilities may find it easier to study at a distance. And I think in India you've got students in prison, for example, and I think we have to look at the needs of these students in a slightly different way. And I think the link with the economy is, of course, that once you start looking at groups of students with particular needs, it becomes very much more expensive. But what do you have to say to that?
You know, regarding the economy, when they say, of course, when we look at the total operations of student support service, it becomes a massive operation. Looking at such a big network and this kind of thing, a lot of money, and we have more than 13,000 counsellors. In Delhi alone, I have more than 1,600 counsellors. So, and we have to, for each counselling session, we have to pay them. For evaluation of assignment, we have to pay them. For the maintenance of day-to-day running of the study center, we have to give certain amount. You know, it is expensive, but if it results to the keeping the student motivated, that is an investment.
Can you tell us a little bit about the students in prison in Delhi? How do you support
we
them?
have this center was because in India, in Asia rather, Delhi has a jail which is known as the Tihar jail, which has more than 10,000 inmates.
Yes.
So what we have done is we have opened a study center, because when we talk about disabled, if we should also think they may be in the prison, they are also disabled in some one or other way.
Yeah.
May not be visually, physically, or this thing, but I put them mentally, and moreover, this what research I have done on the students who have been admitted in IGNOU, all of them are literate, educated.
Right.
Those inmates. It's not that they have just because illiterate. No, they are highly. They know all the how to handle the modern electronic equipment, how to handle these arms. But they are here now. They are in the prison. Now what we have done is, as per their category of their crime.
Okay.
Because they are put in the 4 different jails. They cannot intermix.
Right.
So there is one center, but within that center there are 4 sub-centers.
Right.
And that is linked up with that through cable networking.
Right.
So their counseling is not done face-to-face this way. A counselor has to sit there, and the TV is there in all the 4 prisons where the students are admitted. And they go, and because one counselor cannot go at 4 places.
Well, I think it's very interesting that, and it just shows you how complex it is to manage some student support services once, once you've identified student needs. I think what I'd like to end by doing is to ask you each sort of, as a result of this, this discussion, whether you've got one thought that you'd like to pass on to somebody who's thinking about setting up student support service, whether it be for a particular course or an institution or for a department. I mean, Jane, what would be the thing that you'd say to somebody just about to start on this business?
Well, I guess what I'd say is there are so many pressures right now in open learning systems. There are external pressures such as competition from many different institutions, and also now from private enterprise that's getting into open learning. And there's also fast pace of life, changing technologies, all these kinds of pressures. I think all over the world what I've seen is fiscal restraint coming, whether you're in New Zealand or whether you're in Scandinavia, whether you're in Canada, whether you're in India. You hear people talking about fiscal restraint, and I think given the external pressures and then internal fiscal restraint and so on, it's all too easy to take away the learner support and go back to that industrial model. And what the point I would like to make is, I think we have to always go back to what are we trying to do? What is our goal? We're not just trying to sell a product, which is a package. We're trying to engage in a change process with our learners. And if we start from that point, the first thing that we're going to do is not to dismantle our student support. I think it is integral.
That's very, very helpful.
Okay.
Sharifah, have you got
Well, I agree with Jane entirely. It's integral, and actually now I think in this new age there's a lot of opportunity to make it even better.
Okay. And Devendra?
Rogers will just say one sentence, and this paper which you have given me, it says it is increasingly recognized. I say I am deleting increasingly. It is recognized that student support is integral to successful distance learning.
Okay. Well, finally then, let's just, this discussion is in a sense concentrated on higher education because that's our backgrounds, but I think the principles of what we've been saying are equally applicable to anyone setting up a distance education system at school level or for adult basic education. I mean, the principles are the same, and they're principles of that start off from the learner. And maybe we should call it learner support rather than student support. I don't know what people think about that. But start off from the learner and start off by saying, what does that learner need? Who is that learner? What does she need? What services do we need to provide to meet those needs? And then critical, I think, and this links back to Jane's fiscal point, how do you evaluate it so that you can convince the people who have the money that this is a very vital part of open and distance education? Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
finished siphoning, it's time to put the airlock and bung into our carboy.
Oh, airlock and bung.
Now, as with everything else, we've of course sanitized it before it goes into anything that comes in contact with our beer.
All right, I'll pop it in. Oh, well, we forgot to fill it.
Well, maybe we'll do that after you move it into the closet. Welcome back. Our beer spent 10 days now in this carboy, and yesterday we brought it out here so we wouldn't disturb the sediment while we're racking. Today we actually racked from the carboy into a clean and sanitized primary fermenter. We also took a specific gravity reading. That reading is about the same as the sample we took 3 days ago, so we now know that fermentation has stopped and we're ready for bottling.
Wow, what's that thing?
This thing's called a sulfider. What I've got in here is a mild chlorine solution.
Oh, you're sanitizing your bottles.
That's right.
Must be bottling day.
You bet. Now after this stuff goes in here, we want to make sure we give them a really good rinse. So, over to the bottle washer.
Wow, that's impressive.
Pretty slick, eh?
I'll say.
Really good rinse. And then we'll put it on our drain tree.
Wow. Can I try?
Sure.
All right. Okay, let's see. Wow, this is really neat. I like this.
I think you've got the hang of it.
Okay, and over to the bottle washer. It's a snap. And onto the tree. How'd I do?
Just fine.
Right.
Now before we can bottle our beer, we gotta make sure we get bubbles in it. So what we're
You
gonna...
mean carbon dioxide?
Yeah, carbon dioxide. This is sugar. We use about 3/4 of a cup. Put it into some boiling water. And we're gonna give it a real good stir.
Till it dissolves.
That's right.
Okay.
And now we'll pour it directly into our beer. What this does is it causes secondary fermentation in the bottle.
And bubbles?
That's right, bubbles. We're going to give it a really gentle stir here, just enough to get the sugar mixed in. You don't want to aerate the beer.
What's that you got there?
Well, this is a bottle filler. It's bottling day.
Well, how's it work?
Well, as you can see, we've already got our siphon started.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pop this thing in the end. And now the magic starts.
Wow. That's pretty great, but how do you stop it when you have to fill the next bottle?
Well, there's a little valve at the bottom that lets it flow when it's down and stops when you lift it.
Impressive. So convenient, holy cow.
Now, as you can see, there's a little bit of headspace in there. We got to leave that in there because we were talking before about secondary fermentation.
Or bubbles.
That's right. We're going to need some space for that here to go.
Well, let me have a go.
Okay, you go ahead.
Okay. I can do that. All right.
Now, when we brew a batch of beer, we'd be filling about 72 of these bottles. But we can also use plastic bottles with screw caps.
So good for like picnic or something.
That's right.
Wow, whoa.
Stop.
Hey. Not bad.
Good for you.
I could do this all day. Look at these caps on.
Well, you're going to need one of these. That's a
Whoa.
Larix capper. I got it down at the home beer supply shop.
Oh, well, do show me how it works.
Well, it got the cap on right. There's a magnet in there to make sure it stays in place. We'll put that on top. Push. And squeeze.
Let me see that.
Nothing to it. You want to try?
Wow, absolutely. Okay, let's see. Cap on. 2 hands. And down.
That's right.
Like that.
Yep. Perfect.
Wow, that looks great.
Now, I've got my handy dandy marking pen because there's a little spot in here so I can mark what kind of beer it is.
Lager, right?
That's right. It's a Cooper's Lager, and I'm going to mark a 1 on there so I know it's batch number 1. Alright, now all our beer is marked, labeled, bottled, ready to go, but we do have to wait for it to finish its secondary fermentation in the bottle. So, we're going to move it for about 2 weeks to a warm, dark place.
How about back in the closet?
That's a great place. But after that, for storage sake, we're going to put it somewhere cooler.
Okay. Well, let's go.
We've already made a Cooper's Lager from a kit. Now we're going to try something a little bit more exotic. We're going to make a beer with an unhopped malt extract. In our last recipe, we used 1 kilogram of sugar. In this case, we're going to use another can of malt extract and just a little bit of sugar to help the fermentation get started. We're also going to be using cracked specialty grain, in this case, crystal malt. And we're going to be adding our own hops this time. And these are hop pellets. The style of beer we're going to make this time is a pale ale. The first step we're going to do is add our cracked grains, and our pale ale recipe calls for 500 grams of crystal malt. This grain bag here is pretty well much like a tea bag. I'm going to put it over top of the grain here, and then pour all the grain in. I'll tie it off and take it over to my brew pot. Now we're ready to steep our grains. What that means is we're going to be raising the temperature up from cold to about 150 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to do that on a medium-high heat, but we don't want to boil them. We want to just extract the good flavors. So I'll turn the stove to medium-high, put our lid on, and that should take about 20 minutes or so. While that's happening, I'm going to take these cans, soften up the contents by putting them in a sink full of hot water. So it's been about 20 minutes or so. Let's take a look inside. Well, it looks like it's done its job. There's lots of color in there and it smells really good. We're going to take our grain bag out now. We'll let that drip out. And then put it into this jug. And we're also going to be adding our bittering hops. Now we do have some other hops there, but we'll talk about those later. Now we're going to turn this on to high. We're going to try and get up to a really good rolling boil for about 20 minutes. We need that full 20 minutes to extract the flavors out of the hop pellets. Now I'm opening my cans of malt extract. Both these cans are going to go right into the brew pot. And make sure we use a spatula to get all the good stuff out. Now we've left a little bit of malt in the can, so we're going to go back over to the sink, get some hot water, and try and get it all into our brew pot. Alright, now we're stirred in our malt extract. Now we're going to add the sugar we talked about earlier. Once again, this is just going to help get the fermentation started. And add our other kind of hops, and they're called finishing hops. Finishing hops impart some flavor to the beer, but mostly what they add is aroma. We'll stir them in. Now let's recap our recipe. Our pale ale started with 500 grams of cracked crystal malt steeped in 5 liters of water. about 20 minutes at 150 degrees. Then we added 50 grams of bittering hops in for about 20 minutes in the boil. Then we added 2 cans of Cooper's unhopped malt extract, quarter cup of sugar, and at the very end, 14 grams of finishing hops. Our next step is to add our wort to our primary fermenter, just like we did in the Cooper's lager recipe. Then follow the procedures just as before.
Presenting Cooper's homebrew lineup. Cooper's, #1 in worldwide sales, now with 6 distinct styles, so you can finally brew beer like the experts.